Alright, today we're replacing a water pump on a 2007 Dodge Ram 2500. It's got the 5.9 liter in it. It's the last of the 5.9s. 2007 and a half, they went to the 6.7. So you might see something like this when you park your vehicle. Start getting a little coolant leak. It's really small at first. Small drips coming down the bottom. You might be wondering where it's coming from. Well, it's your water pump, most likely, unless you use your vehicle. There it is right there. You can see some of the orange splashed around it. So I've already ordered all my parts. I've already drained my coolant. I'm reusing my coolant because I replaced it not that long ago. It's like brand new. And this stuff's about almost 30 bucks a jug, so I'm not going to waste it. Got my parts, ordered everything from Amazon. Gino's Garage is also a great source for this stuff. I went with an aftermarket Gates pump. I've painted it already so it won't rust up. I did some research on these pumps. So I've got 65,000 miles on this truck and it's already leaking. And that's a original Cummins pump. So in my opinion, it sure seems like the Cummins pumps don't last a whole lot longer than the other pumps. So I'm just going with the $31 Gates 43526 is the part number for 98.5 up to 2007. And they're 31 bucks. Like I said, the Cummins pump is 190 bucks. So I can replace this thing many times before I get to that price. And obviously they don't last much longer. No offense to the Cummins parts. I love OEM parts, but they got to be better in order to justify spending the money. Got a Gates belt. Since I haven't replaced my belt yet, I'm just going to pull the belt that I have on here off and use it as a spare if for some reason it fails. You're supposed to replace the tensioner at the same time, but like I said, this is a pretty low mileage pickup here. I got 65,000 miles on it, so I'm only doing some of the basic stuff. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with the belt that's in there. I'm just going to throw it in the back and use it as a spare. I'm replacing the thermostat at the same time. Another Gates part, 74125589, made in the USA. Comes with the O-ring already attached to it. That was 16 bucks. I'm going with the stock 190 degree thermostat. And the Gates belt is a K081264HD. It's got the green. It's supposed to be heavy duty. I'm sure there's not a huge difference between them, but I just went with the 36 bucks for the belt, 16 for the thermostat, 31 for the water pump, and I got it all on Amazon. All right. First thing you got to do is drain your coolant. Pull your radiator cap. Drain your fluid from that petcock right there. You can hook a little hose up to the nipple and not make much of a mess. I drained it right into those clean jugs. I got 4 gallons out of it, just draining it from the radiator. So be prepared. Or you can just drain it into a drain bucket. But like I said, you're going to get about 4 gallons out of it, so make sure you have something big enough. So drain your fluid. And then I'm going to remove my thermostat housing here. It's got 3 bolts, 8mm heads. I'm going to pop that off, pull this hose to the side. All right, thermostat's out. Not a big deal. Just pull the 3 8mm bolts, set them aside. Like I said, the thermostat is 190 degrees, factory. So now I'm going to replace or remove this fan shroud support and free up some space to get at that water pump down there. And that should give me enough room to get it out. Alright, got the fan shroud support out of there. 1 15mm nut down there. A 13 holding that wire clamp on. And then 2 10mm. Comes right out. Plenty of room. You got to unhook this cable bunch. Not a big deal. Now you can see that water pump pretty good. We're going to pull the belt next. And there's the part. You can see it's got some coolant cheese slung up onto it from the pump. There's a 15 millimeter that's connected to the plastic. And then the other bolts. Really easy. Alright, when you're pulling the belt, you just got to get a breaker bar on that tensioner down there. I believe it's a 1/2 inch drive. And release that belt tension. Pop it off the alternator or the water pump, whatever's easiest, and then you're good to go from there. If you aren't familiar with the belt routing, make sure you draw a little picture before you take it off, because sometimes it can get confusing if you aren't super familiar with it. Sometimes there's a sticker out here. Mine does not have a sticker. So I'll draw a little diagram of where it goes before I take it off. And we'll pop this belt off. Get that pump out of there. Alright, there's my little belt diagram. Real simple. And I mentioned before that this was 15 millimeters. I'm sorry, it's 13 millimeter, and so is that one. No 15 millimeters. So there's our belt diagram. Easy. I've got my breaker bar attached to the tensioner down there, and we just push it towards the center line, and it releases the tension this way. I'm going to pull the belt, and we'll get that pump out. Alright, got the belt off. I've got the 2 bolts for the water pump backed up, but you can still see where they're at. Got the one at the top just below that wire loom, right there. And then the other one at the bottom right there. Again, you're going to need a 10 millimeter socket to remove these guys. Doesn't take a whole lot of grunt. They're only in there with about 18 foot-pounds of torque. And that's what we'll retorque the new pump with, 18 foot-pounds. That's the spec. I'm going to pop this thing off with a little pry bar just to persuade it out a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be real sticky or not. We'll see. Got a little drain bucket below. That's it. It's a little bit more dribbling out. I'll pull those bolts off, clean the gasket surface, and we'll be ready to install the new pump. Alright, got the pump out. As you can see, it looks like my weep hole was weeping. And then the seal at the head of the shaft there was leaking too. So it looks like it's just a seal issue. Like I said, this thing wasn't like vibrating or making noise or anything. I just had a little leak. Down here, you can see the little sludge puddle below that where it was leaking, just to confirm. And if you aren't sure if this is your problem, this water pump leak, you can always just do a simple pressure test on your system and track where the leak is coming from. I just used a mirror and a flashlight, and I saw that there was leaking going on around the shaft and where it was splashing around, and knew it was the water pump. Let's get the thing cleaned up and put the new one in. Alright, got the gasket surface all cleaned up puke that was crusting down there on the cover there. Yeah, make sure you get that gasket surface nice and clean. It's an O-ring, so it likes a nice, clean machined surface. So don't get crazy with anything that's too abrasive. That'll score up that surface. So we're clean down there. I've got my water pump prepped here. I always use silicone grease on O-rings. It helps them hold them into place in the grooves that they're in, and when you torque them down, it helps them slip into position where they want to be instead of getting caught up and cinched down in a unnatural position. I also greased up the O-ring on the thermostat, same idea. It just helps things seat. So with that all set up, I'm going to put a dab of blue Loctite on my water pump bolts. It's not necessary, but I like to just have that little bit of insurance. These things vibrate a little bit. Got my torque wrench, 18 foot-pounds. So we're going to torque it to. Get this thing slipped into place and torque it down. Keep moving. Got the new pump in place. Torqued both the 10mm head bolts down to 18 foot-pounds. And everything looks good. Nice and clean. It's key to clean everything up because this pump is going to fail again if you keep the truck long enough. And you want to be able to identify that. So when you're looking around, you know, if you see all the crusty trickle from the last time, it might look like the pump's failed again, but in reality you might have a bad radiator this time or a hose. You know. The cleaner it is, the easier it is to identify what the failure is. Just keep that in mind. All right, pump's in and torqued. Got the belt back on. That's probably the hardest part, honestly, is getting that belt over everything and behind the tensioner. That's it. Everything's tightened up. Belt's on. I'm going to put the thermostat housing back on and the bracket for the fan shroud. And then we'll evacuate the cooling system, put a vacuum on it, and suck in some new coolant. Alright, the bracket's back in place, the fan shroud support. The wire's back in place as well, snap back in, nothing's broken. And remember I said to put a little silicone grease on that thermostat gasket, helps everything get seated. I'm ready to torque this thermostat housing down, 200 inch-pounds or 16.6 foot-pounds. Alright, everything's all buttoned up. I put my old belt to my little sheath that came with the new belt so I know what the part number was on the old one, or the new one. This belt was in great shape, only had 65,000 miles on it, so it'll be a nice emergency belt, just in case. Throw it in the back of the truck. Again, the old water pump, not attractive. Got a lot of leaking going on. And then the old thermostat. These will get pitched. So I'm about ready to put more coolant in. The old coolant, but it wasn't that old. Only had probably 7,000 miles on it. Now I think this pump went because I have not driven this truck but 3 times this year. I think it's just from sitting for so long. I mean, it's only got 65,000 miles on it. So what I'm doing now is I'm putting a vacuum on the system. So it's a Venturi vacuum. You need compressed air. You hook up your compressor, flick this valve here, and it discharges the air. I put it into the expansion tank because when you get close to the top, it'll start sputtering and spitting coolant. And then when you're ready, you can suck your old coolant or fresh coolant back into the system. As you can see, pulling a vacuum on the system right now. You want it in the green. Big systems like this are going to take a little bit. Don't worry, leave it on there for a minute or two. It's going to need it. And then when I'm ready to put the coolant in, I can check that and make sure the system isn't leaking. So I turn this off. And if I don't see that needle drop, I've got a sealed system. So that's checking the new thermostat O-ring, the water pump, making sure I got my petcock at the bottom of the radiator tight. Again, this is a snap-on tool. Everybody makes them though, Matco, Mac, all the guys have the same thing. But this one is a snap-on one. So I'm well into the safe zone here. Close my valve. Make sure my needle doesn't drop. And it looks like we're in good shape. You can leave it there for a couple minutes. Note the vacuum in inches that's on it, and then make sure it hasn't dropped, because this can have a slow leak. And when you're all set here, all your hoses are going to be collapsed because they're under vacuum. This is a great way. And then when you're ready, you just open the valve, suck that coolant back in there, and then when you're done, before it runs out, don't lose that vacuum. Close the valve, switch bottles, and then do it again. And then once I get most of the coolant back in there, I will evacuate it one more time, get another vacuum on it, and then do it again. So I've let it sit here for a while and made sure there was no leaks. There are no leaks. This is checking your water pump O-ring, your thermostat O-ring, your petcock at the bottom of the radiator, making sure everything's still sealed. So this is what I'm opening next. This tube goes down to the coolant. There's a little screen at the bottom of the tube that prevents any chunks getting sucked back in, but you can see here as I open this valve. It starts to suck it down pretty quick. Then you're going to hit a point right around between 15 and 20 where it just sits there and just sucks it in. And keep an eye on the bottle. It's going down pretty quick. But again, I got to put 4 gallons into this thing, at least, because that's what I got out of it. And as I get towards the bottom, close the valve. Then you can tip this to keep that thing up, get more out of there, and then dump the rest into the next bottle. Then as you see, when I shut it off, it jumped back up again, which is normal. But this tool is the best, man, I'm telling you. You can put everything back together again, knowing that you don't have to tear it apart later once you fire this thing up and it gets warm and starts leaking. It's a good tool. So that's it. Got it all buttoned up, topped off the overflow tank, put the cap back on, filled it up to the neck. No leaks. Here's the belt routing one more time in case you got stuck. And I suspect that, like I may have said, 65,000 miles, and I just don't drive this truck like I used to. I mean, it's the middle of March and I've only driven it 3 times this year, so I'm suspecting that this pump just didn't like sitting for as long as it has, because 65,000 is a little premature for failure. The coolant is not the OEM coolant. I'm using this Final Charge Global made by Peak. I read all about it. It seems to be really good stuff. It's just super expensive. They say it's pretty much the last coolant you'll need, but you know, coolant doesn't last forever. But I'm going to be running this for quite a while. New thermostat, 190. Always use fresh coolant. This was kind of an exceptional situation. And good luck, man. You guys can do this. This is not hard. I'd say this whole thing, if I wasn't messing around with the video instruction, it would probably take me an hour and a half total. Like I said, the belt was the worst. Just time consuming, flossing it around everything. Again, there's your pump. 43526. Thanks for watching. Don't be scared of this stuff. It's pretty simple. You can do it. Good luck.